My name is Michael, and I'm married to Jennifer for 17 years. We have 2 kids, a son named Jacob, and a daughter named Emily. Jennifer had been consistently arriving home late from work for a while now, and today was no different. It was nearly 10 p.m. The kids and I had already eaten dinner and completed our homework, and they had been in bed for about an hour. They hadn't even asked about their mom or why she wasn't home. This was a recent change, and it saddened me. I had spent the past hour reviewing our finances. Over the last 2 years, our financial situation had significantly deteriorated. Our income had dropped considerably, although my wife seemed oblivious to it, as she continued to spend freely. It felt like she thought we had no financial worries at all. I had just finished paying our most recent bills, and we might be able to get by for a couple more months. I had also been reevaluating my life plan. Perhaps I had made a mistake. For the past 2 years, I had been staring at a looming problem, wondering if and when it would finally catch up with us. I had always assumed it would eventually, but doubts were starting to creep in. I'm not sure how long she stood there watching me. Lately, I'd been lost in my own thoughts more often, causing me to lose track of time. Finally, with her arms crossed and that all too familiar look of disapproval on her face, she spoke. "Michael, I want a divorce." I'm not entirely certain about my emotions in that specific moment. My spirit felt incredibly burdened by self-doubt and self-loathing, almost rendering me numb to any new feelings. It wasn't exactly a humorous situation, yet I found myself trying to suppress a laugh. My wife, with whom I had spent 17 years, had just informed me that our relationship was coming to an end, and everything we had built together was unraveling. It was a sensation I hadn't experienced in a while, and it almost brought a sense of relief. I gazed at her briefly, allowing myself one last trip down memory lane to revisit our happier times. Then, it was back to reality. All right. I excelled more as a programmer than as a manager. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, programmers often get promoted to become project leaders, then department heads, and finally, senior management. This is how I ended up as the senior manager of product development, which sounded impressive but was essentially a glorified sales position. The truth was, at that time, I was the most qualified person for the job. I had essentially birthed our flagship product line by myself, nurtured it through its early stages, and guided it through 6 subsequent upgrades. I knew our product inside and out. When customers had questions, I had answers. When our staff faced issues, I knew how to resolve them. With a new haircut and an expensive suit, I certainly looked the part. I had more proficiency as a programmer than as a manager. Regrettably, the typical career progression for programmers involves moving up to become project leaders, then department heads, and ultimately senior management. This sequence led to me becoming the senior manager of product development. It sounded impressive, but it was essentially a fancy title for a sales role. In reality, I was the most qualified for the job at that time. I had essentially created our flagship product line almost single-handedly, nurturing it through its early stages and overseeing its growth through 6 successive upgrades. I possessed the most in-depth knowledge of our product. I could provide answers to customer inquiries and resolve staff issues with ease. A new hairstyle and an expensive suit completed the image. It came as no surprise when I was let go from Chicago Technology Solutions. If I had been my own supervisor, I likely would have made the same decision. My attendance at meetings had been inconsistent at best, and we had missed too many deadlines. I wasn't deliberately trying to get fired at the time, but I also didn't put forth much effort to retain my position at CTS. I had been in a prolonged slump. It took nearly 3 months to emerge from my initial state of depression and attempt to move forward. However, that endeavor had also been a dismal failure. It took me another month to find a solution to my predicament, or at least one I could accept. If I hadn't had the kids, I believe I might have gone insane. Their well-established routine became my lifeline, helping me regain a sense of positivity. It was a constant cycle of breakfast, school, snack, homework, dinner, and bedtime. Embracing this routine became my guiding principle, and it gradually led me back to a more stable life. I fully embraced the role of a stay-at-home dad, taking charge of household chores and being the kids' chauffeur. The children genuinely appreciated my increased presence at home, which made me realize that I still had value. I wasn't entirely without worth. If my wife noticed the shift in our family dynamic, she never acknowledged it. I'm almost certain she didn't even recognize it. My first encounter with Jennifer Riley occurred at a fraternity mixer. I had nearly decided not to attend. I had joined the fraternity primarily for the post-graduation opportunities it would offer, not for partying during college. I believed I would need all the advantages I could get. My academic performance was outstanding, so I wasn't concerned about that. However, in all other aspects, I was simply average height, weight, looks, personality, just average. Jennifer, on the other hand, was the kind of average that looked much better on a woman. She was somewhat reserved, a bit of a wallflower. I observed her for quite a while before mustering the courage to strike up a conversation. Our initial interaction was brief and hushed, but we introduced ourselves. Over the next few weeks, we met for coffee and shared study sessions at the library. We had been conversing for almost 2 months before our first official date. From that moment forward, it became the most incredible period of my life. We enjoyed 15 years of pure happiness. Our courtship was brief, and our engagement even briefer. Shortly after graduating, we got married and settled into our first apartment in Chicago. We commuted together, taking the morning and evening trains to and from our first jobs. Finances were tight, but we faced it as a united front. We shared almost everything in common: family backgrounds, dating histories, interests, and aspirations. Where we didn't align, we complemented each other. If there was something I wasn't good at, Jennifer excelled, and vice versa. I managed our finances more effectively, while Jennifer expertly handled our social and family schedules. We collaborated seamlessly, and our lives quickly improved. Over the next few years, we both received multiple promotions. Our circle of friends grew significantly. We managed to save money for our first home, while still enjoying travel and entertainment. Our intimate life mirrored our relationship's progression, slowly but steadily. Holding hands and sharing kisses from our first date, we gradually progressed to more intimate moments when we became exclusive. 8 years into our marriage, Jennifer left her job when our son Jacob was born, followed by our daughter Emily a little over a year later. We purchased a suburban 3-bedroom house with enough space for a dog. Along with the house, we bought a family sedan and a minivan. In general, our lives were falling into place nicely: 2 kids, a pet, a house, and 2 cars. It was completely ordinary, and I didn't think I could be any happier. However, I was mistaken. My promotion to manager came shortly after Emily's first birthday. It felt like a reward for years of blending in with the average crowd without complaining. As I mentioned, my new salary was quite substantial, and we didn't take it for granted. I had flexible hours, mostly working from home and only heading to the office for staff and management team meetings. They say that money can't buy happiness, and I believe that's true. What it can buy, though, are stylish clothes, personal grooming, better health care, a newer home in a nicer neighborhood, and confidence. I went from being average to slightly above average. My wife transformed from being average, which I already found beautiful, to slightly above average, which I now thought was incredibly attractive. Our already good bed life reached new heights. We traveled more comfortably, spent quality time with our children, and saved more money for retirement. When Emily began attending elementary school, Jennifer expressed her desire to return to part-time work. She quickly found a job at a startup marketing firm that she thought she'd enjoy. Her work routine aligned with dropping off and picking up the kids from school, which was a great addition. We didn't rely on her income, so we could save it. Based on my calculations, we were on track to retire comfortably by the time our kids finished college. Update. I stumbled upon the fact that my wife was having an affair 3 months before our 15th wedding anniversary, purely by accident on my birthday. In reality, I had discovered the evidence 2 days before my birthday, but it took me a few weeks to piece it all together. Initially, I didn't think much of Jennifer taking a more active role in her new job. It meant she'd be working a few extra hours a week, and I didn't mind picking up the kids from school. It didn't significantly disrupt my schedule. About 3 months into her new role, I noticed she seemed preoccupied quite often, so I asked her about it. She explained that she was adjusting to her job and feeling a bit stressed. In an effort to ease her burden, I decided to take on more responsibilities at home. When our passionate bed life began to decline noticeably, we had a conversation about it. She explained that she was getting older and didn't feel the need to have closeness as frequently. Surprisingly, it was the first time I'd heard her use the F word, but things did improve for a while. Our physical intimacy did pick up for a few weeks, but then decreased again. I hesitated to bring it up once more, fearing an argument. I was nearly at my wits' end when I stumbled upon the gift. The weather had turned cooler, and I was searching for one of my sweaters. I had taken on the laundry duties and sometimes mixed up which closet the clothes should go in. While sifting through sweaters on her closet shelf, I noticed it hidden behind several old shoeboxes. It was hard to miss. The unmistakable pink box with a white ribbon from the lingerie store. The card addressed to lover piqued my curiosity. A brief internal struggle ensued. Should I look or should I wait? Ultimately, I chose to open it. I wasn't sure if I could wait until my birthday to enjoy my wife after reading the card. Please disregard the packaging of this gift. You can unwrap your actual present on your birthday when I'm wearing what's inside the box. Then you can have my last virginity. Love always, Jennifer. For the next 48 hours, I made extra efforts. I greeted her with flowers at the door, gave her a foot massage, and cooked her favorite dinner. Her response wasn't what I had anticipated. It seemed like she was merely tolerating my affection. On my birthday, I ensured that the kids finished their homework early to avoid any interruptions to my gift. I was somewhat surprised when Jennifer arrived home late from work, and her question about dinner left me even more puzzled. However, I played along in anticipation of my surprise. I suggested going out for pizza, which delighted the kids, and we headed out. Michael had conspired with our waitress, and just before we left, the waitstaff serenaded me with a rendition of Happy Birthday. I thought I detected surprise in my wife's eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "I'll give you your present later, Michael," she said, wearing a smile. The drive home was filled with tension, and I nearly got into an accident. The 15 minutes of waiting for the kids to get ready for bed felt brutal, but the following 15 minutes, waiting for them to fall asleep, were excruciating. Thankfully, Jennifer returned from an emergency trip to the store for milk shortly after the kids had fallen asleep. When I reached the bedroom door, Jennifer wasn't in the room. I sat on the bed, growing increasingly frustrated with the games. When would I receive my gift? She emerged from the bathroom wearing a full-length flannel nightgown, her face devoid of makeup, and her hair tied in a ponytail. At this point, I was becoming quite frustrated with the whole situation. When would I finally receive my present? She climbed into bed, pulled up the covers, and reached for her bedside lamp, then paused. Oops, I almost forgot. She opened a drawer on her nightstand and retrieved a small square box, wrapped in the multicolored balloon paper we had used for Michael's last birthday. She handed it to me, saying, "Happy birthday, dear." With that, she rolled over, turned off her lamp, and went to sleep. I was too shocked to even open her gift. The next day, my depression hit me full force. I kept replaying the day's events in my mind, trying to figure out what I had done to put such a damper on our evening. I felt completely lost and wallowed in my despair for nearly 2 weeks. That present seemed to taunt me, a constant reminder of my failure. I've heard all the cliches like, the husband is the last to know, but I must admit that I was genuinely clueless. The idea of Jennifer cheating on me was so foreign that it never crossed my mind. However, it was the first thing that popped into my head when she called home 13 days after my birthday saying, "It's Alan's 30th birthday, and the staff is taking him out to celebrate. I might be home pretty late." I don't recall how I responded or even walking to the bedroom closet, but I do remember staring at the empty space where my present had been. I also remember the excruciating pain in my chest and rushing to the bathroom to throw up. For longer than I'd like to admit, I thought I might be having a heart attack, and for a brief moment, I wished it were true, hoping for an escape from the pain. Alan Henderson, Jennifer's boss, was a slick and somewhat sleazy-looking advertising executive a few years younger than both Jennifer and me. I had met him only once, and I distinctly remembered not liking him, mostly because he came across as insincere whenever he spoke. It was Emily who snapped me back to reality, asking, "Are you okay, Daddy?" It took a few moments for my eyes to focus on my daughter, who was standing over me, on the verge of tears. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Daddy just ate something that upset his stomach. I'll be out in just a minute. I need to clean up." Eventually, I made it out of the bathroom, though I don't recall much after that. I do remember grabbing my dusty bottle of scotch. Judging by the headache I woke up with the next morning, I knew I had downed several glasses. I had no clue when Jennifer had come home. When I found her in the kitchen, feeding the kids the next morning, she appeared as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. She was simply going through her routine. It was the slight wince I noticed on her face when she sat down to eat that shattered any remaining love I had. It was incredibly subtle, but it was there. I wish I could tell you that I confronted my cheating wife, but I didn't. I was utterly devastated. Moving was all I could manage, and things didn't improve for several weeks. I felt like a zombie. Each day, as I observed my wife going through the motions at home without a care in the world, I felt progressively worse. I thought I had hit rock bottom. Update 1. It wasn't until the weekend of my 15th wedding anniversary that I finally shook myself out of it and decided to take action. To be honest, I had been acting like a wimp. I knew it, and there's probably some psychological term for my behavior. If my dad were alive, he'd simply call me a fool, and he'd be right. The fog in my mind lifted when my wife mentioned she had to travel for a work conference during our anniversary. I'm not entirely sure why it bothered me, but it did. It felt like one more level of disrespect. Her complete disregard for the date hurt. After drowning my sorrows in alcohol on our anniversary night, I woke up angry and had reached my breaking point. I called my lawyer and scheduled an appointment. I was ready to end this charade, convinced that my life couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. The fierce determination with which I entered my attorney's office was quickly replaced by crushing disbelief. I knew divorces could be challenging, and I thought that my wife's affair would work in my favor. Instead, my lawyer poked holes in my case one after the other. I had no concrete evidence of the affair, and even if I did, it wouldn't make much of a difference. Our assets would likely be split 50-50. I had no proof of my wife being an unfit parent, so shared custody was the best I could hope for. Our income disparity also favored my wife. I would have to pay spousal maintenance and child support. She would probably get primary custody and stay in the house for the children's sake. I felt like a betrayed fool, and my wife seemed to get away with everything. I went from feeling depressed to completely distraught. Even my unfaithful wife noticed after a few weeks and asked about it. "You look really worn out, Michael. Is something bothering you?" I replied with a forced, "No, dear." At least she made an effort to pretend she cared while I just drifted through life. Then I lost my job, although I didn't realize it at the time. Strangely, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. My glimmer of hope came from an unexpected source: the evening news. I was watching a series of depressing stories that seemed to match my mood perfectly. However, one story caught my attention. A major East Coast employer had gone bankrupt. Former employees were struggling to receive their final paychecks and were worried about their pensions. For once, I felt like some people might be in an even worse situation than me. Then, the news analyst shared his thoughts. The employees might win a judgment against their former employer, but it wouldn't matter because there was no money left. It didn't take much for me to connect the dots and come up with a basic plan. After all, my wife couldn't take what didn't exist. If we had nothing, we would split nothing. Yes, I would be sacrificing my share, but since I was already going to lose half, did the rest really matter? My plan started out quite simple. I was unemployed and had no intention of looking for work. I decided to spend our life savings until there was nothing left. I admit it was a foolish idea, and even I had doubts about its success, but it was something I could hold on to. 2 years can feel like an eternity. It was excruciatingly dull for me, especially since I was alone most of the time. It became evident that Jennifer had been the life of our friend group. As she distanced herself from me, I found myself lacking strong friendships. Being an only child with both parents passing away at a young age left me truly isolated. I won't bore you with a detailed day-to-day account of my life during this period. In simple terms, it was a miserable 2 years. The only bright spot during this time was my children. Before this, I had never spent money on anything unnecessary. I was meticulous about keeping receipts for every purchase. I began making small weekly cash withdrawals and saving the money. After about 2 months, it struck me that we weren't spending money quickly enough to make a significant difference. It turned out that I was excellent at saving money, but not so great at spending it. So I decided to step up my game and make some changes to my initial plan. I enrolled in an executive MBA program at a local but expensive university. This single decision cost me nearly $120,000. I paid for a new luxury SUV in cash, totaling $60,000. I also fully funded educational savings accounts for my kids, which set me back another $260,000. I splurged on a new wardrobe and began taking increasingly large cash withdrawals twice a week. Interestingly, I rarely used the money for gambling during these outings. I spent a few dollars here and there just to keep myself entertained. I made sure to spend enough to create the appearance that I had spent the day at the casino, complete with receipts for meals, snacks, and parking fees. Most of the money, however, went into a wall safe in our garage, serving as my personal post-divorce emergency fund in case things turned ugly. My other costly endeavor, I hired full-time private surveillance on my wife and her lover. I requested a comprehensive package, including video footage, photos, and a daily diary of events. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit how much that set me back. You might be wondering if my wife noticed my spending habits. I'd say she did, except for the gambling part. I had to inform her about the money transfer to the kids because I needed her signature for the custodial accounts. She also saw my new car and clothing. Strangely, she never mentioned them. I'm pretty sure she believed I was working and that we were still living a comfortable life. She made a few purchases herself, and I didn't question her about them. I often wondered who was benefiting from her more frequent lingerie purchases, but it was a topic we never discussed. We maintained a cordial but distant relationship, interacting daily as if we were merely tolerating roommates who didn't particularly like each other. As for our bed life, well, that was a non-existent subject. Spending time with my children was the best part of my life. I made sure to support their interests, whether it was working on homework together or playing games. We enjoyed outings to parks, went on bike rides, and watched movies. Since I had taken on the role of the house chef, my kids seemed interested in helping out with cooking. I found some simple recipes for us to try, and they eagerly joined in. Jennifer was usually around during the week, but I didn't exclude her from our family time nor actively include her. If she wanted to participate, she did so without any special effort on my part. I received a weekly report detailing my wife's activities. At first, I believed she was involved with her boss, but it turned out she had been with a few guys from her office. A few months later, even the company's clients made their way into her social calendar. Did it hurt? Not really. I already had a low opinion of her. Having proof didn't affect me much. The report wasn't very intriguing. The videos were poorly made and didn't excite me much. It became evident that Alan Henderson wasn't a skilled lover, despite having the chance to be intimate with several different women. This surprised me. I had assumed, given the gift she bought, that he and my wife were in some kind of relationship, but it seemed more like casual encounters. He engaged with her despite his slightly below-average size, and she went along with it. The same held true for most of the other 6 men involved with my wife. However, there was one client, a nerdy-looking guy with glasses and a pocket protector that cemented his geek status, who seemed particularly enthusiastic with Jennifer. The pictures and videos were too grainy to determine if she enjoyed it, but it appeared rather painful to me. About a year into this journey, I realized I hadn't experienced a pleasant. It didn't really bother me. It was just one more thing adding to my miserable existence. After a year, I decided to stop the surveillance. I had seen enough, and reviewing the material had become more of a chore, filled with garbage. Despite having classes, looking after the kids, and my gambling, I had plenty of free time, so I focused on what life might be like after my marriage, which I assumed would end at some point. I began a new exercise routine. I had always been in decent shape. Nothing exceptional, of course. Over time, I made some good progress with my bench press and running stamina. I believed that having huge muscles and good looks was mostly genetic, and clearly I didn't fit into either category. Nevertheless, I was personally satisfied with my appearance. I started researching the latest news in my former industry because I figured I would need a job eventually. Being away for a year had put me further behind than I thought. I spent a few hours each day learning about the latest technologies and software packages. I took a particular interest in my old company, CTS. It seemed they were stagnant. They weren't losing market share, and their revenues were stable, but they weren't making significant progress. In the tech business, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. I also invested a considerable amount of time in researching divorces. While I did spend some time coming up with new and potentially devious plans for dealing with my hopefully soon-to-be ex-wife, most of my time was spent studying how divorce affects children. I had already worked through much of my pain, and the children had played a significant role in that. I wanted to ensure that when their transition came, I would be fully prepared. There is a lot of information available, although I found a substantial portion of it to be unhelpful. Update 2. About 8 months later into my journey, I began to feel anxious. My wife started returning home at a regular time, engaging in conversations about my day. I responded briefly, but she persisted. She began dressing more provocatively for bedtime, as if trying to revive the intimacy we once had. Things went from bad to worse after a few weeks. For a year and a half, she had been distant and merely going through the motions. Now she started complaining about our lack of communication and talked about working on our marriage. In response, I chose complete silence. Her efforts to reconcile continued until her birthday. I left her gift on the dining room table, using the same wrapping paper she had used for my last gift. The contents of the present shouldn't have come as a surprise. It had taken me 6 months to open the last birthday gift she had given me, a cheap digital watch. When I stumbled upon a similar watch in the impulse buy section of our local 24-hour convenience store, priced at $9.95, I initially felt irritated, but when I saw they had a matching ladies' model, My resentment faded. I purchased it and waited 18 months to give it to her. I almost wish I could have witnessed her reaction, but unfortunately, I wasn't around when she opened the gift. The kids and I had an impromptu movie night that lasted late, and she had already left by the time we woke up the next day. Everything quickly returned to my new normal. Jennifer started spending more and more time at the office, and our communication at home became minimal. Then it happened. "Michael, I want a divorce." I had hoped she would get it over with swiftly, but it took almost a week before I was served with her divorce petition, which I found rather amusing. The petition included requests for spousal and child support, unequal distribution of assets in her favor, and cited mental and emotional cruelty as relevant factors. I decided to wait until the following Monday to take the kids camping, as I didn't want them around when things escalated. We returned 6 days later, feeling relaxed and rejuvenated, only to find Jennifer waiting for us at home. She was sitting alone in the living room, looking unwell. I wondered which part of my counteractions surprised her the most. I had filed for divorce in response, citing adultery and seeking the house, our primary asset, and full custody of the children. I also requested spousal and child support because I had been unemployed and taking care of the kids full-time for 2 years. Additionally, I initiated alienation of affection lawsuits against Jennifer's 7 sexual partners, though I had no illusions about winning them. I also filed civil lawsuits against her employer and the companies of the 3 clients who had engaged in relations with my wife. Once again, I didn't believe I could emerge victorious, but the negative publicity might turn things in my favor. Ultimately, I dispatched a DVD containing Jennifer's incriminating moments to her parents and her best friend as a clear message that I wouldn't hesitate to use it. Even though all the evidence had been mentioned in my counter lawsuit, I wanted to eliminate any chances. The kids grabbed a snack and went to their rooms to prepare for bedtime, paying little attention to their mother. She made no attempt to engage with them. I headed to the fridge for a beer, then settled into the chair across from Jennifer in the living room. "Oh, Jennifer, I don't hate you. Hatred requires effort. To be completely honest, I haven't put forth any effort when it comes to you. All my energy is focused on taking care of myself and my children." "But I am your wife." "Stop. I won't tolerate someone like you tarnishing my wife's good name. My wife was a loving and caring woman, my closest friend and partner, and the mother of my children. She's gone. You've taken her place, but don't act as if you have any connection to me." It was a long while before she spoke again. "What should I do now?" Is that a rhetorical question, or do you genuinely want my input? I didn't let her respond before continuing. "I suppose there are several potential solutions for your situation. You could move far away and attempt to start a new life. That's the choice I'd make. I'll never allow my children to spend significant time with you, so that shouldn't factor into your decision to leave. Alternatively, you could try to tough it out here, lingering around town, trying to keep your head up. But who knows who will hear about your little escapades, or who would want to employ someone like you. You might find someone willing to settle for a person with your reputation. But what kind of a despicable individual would that be? Alternatively, you could reflect on your actions. I genuinely hope you don't choose that path. It would deny me the pleasure of witnessing your suffering, just as you deserve. Then again, I'm not sure my opinion holds any significance for someone as foolish as you. It certainly didn't when you decided to become involved with your boss. I had been imagining delivering that speech for months. I should have felt content about the chance to say it. While I watched each word crush whatever remained of her spirit, I had anticipated finding some satisfaction. However, I only felt hollow instead. Final update. Life after the divorce had its ups and downs. I achieved better results with my lawsuits than I had initially expected. I received slightly over $1 million in settlements from the 3 companies whose employees had been involved with my ex-wife. It was surprising because my lawyer had advised me not to anticipate much. After reviewing the situation, we concluded that they didn't want to risk negative publicity after witnessing how we handled my ex-wife's company. We had dismantled my ex-wife's company through legal tactics like discovery motions, depositions, and leaking information to the media. I also launched a subtle campaign, reaching out to the CEOs of their remaining clients with details about my wife, her boss, and their illicit activities, asking, "Do you really want to stay associated with this company when things go south?" It took time, but gradually their revenues dwindled. Employees who didn't want to be linked to the scandal left their jobs. Ultimately, the company declared bankruptcy. Alan Henderson was dismissed and left town in disgrace. While the $200,000 check I received was smaller compared to my other victories, it was much more satisfying. I didn't receive anything from my alienation of affection lawsuits, as I had never really expected to. Nevertheless, 4 wives managed to secure substantial settlements in subsequent divorces. It wasn't all celebrations and happiness. I also suffered in the process. Encounters with people aware of my situation were not uncommon. The mocking and teasing were quite intense for a while. I don't know whether it was fortunate or unfortunate that I didn't really care. I already felt like a failure, so hearing it from others didn't have much impact on me. Some of the insults were surprisingly witty. I managed to shield my children from most of the negative consequences. Their well-being had always been my top priority. They were upset for a period, but they recovered fairly quickly. My greatest triumph was my return to CTS as Vice President of Design and Development. As a distraction from my personal struggles, I immersed myself in programming again. During my 2 difficult years, I devised an add-on for CTS's main software, allowing it to easily integrate with 2 other popular software packages from rival companies. I founded my own company and started marketing my creation. In less than a year, all 3 companies made offers to acquire my company and my software. I received $11 million for my company and an incredible compensation package from CTS. For a while, I contemplated retirement. However, with my almost non-existent social life, I was convinced that I would become a recluse if I didn't provide myself with a reason to leave the house every day. My increased income allowed me to hire a kind elderly lady who served as both a part-time housekeeper and a nanny for the kids. After a year, Mrs. Marlene Jensen became a full-time resident, staying in the guest suite above the garage in our new home. She played a grandmotherly role to my children, usually warm and gentle but firm when necessary. What I valued most was the guidance she could offer, rooted in her life experience. I cherished my children and did my best to be a supportive and caring father. However, I was also emotionally scarred and cynical. I turned to her for advice when faced with decisions. As time passed, the children grew into well-adjusted adults, and I occasionally saw them and their families. Unfortunately, our closeness dwindled over time. I held no grudges. It was better for me to keep my bitterness at bay and maintain some distance from their lives. Mrs. Jensen worked for me until the kids went off to college, and then she retired. I provided her with free accommodations and meals as her pension. She had been a constant presence in my life for 15 years. Despite her efforts to encourage me to live and find a companion, she passed away knowing that I would always be alone. I never really opened up to anyone again. My friendships remained superficial and unsatisfying. My dating life was practically non-existent, except for a few group outings arranged by casual acquaintances. I earned a well-deserved reputation as a cold-hearted, ruthless individual not to be crossed. Most people avoided me, and I couldn't blame anyone but myself. I managed my sexual needs adequately. My increasing wealth allowed me to maintain a regular rotation of call girls, and I compensated them generously for their time and services, essentially having casual encounters with them before showing them the door. There was one I grew fond of for a while, who went by Candy but later revealed her real name was Mary Beth. She was a passionate and willing partner, and it seemed like our connection went beyond just a client-provider relationship. However, I couldn't burden someone else with my emotional baggage, so when I sensed she was getting too attached, I ended things. As for Jennifer, she faced her own challenges in life. She made efforts to reach out to me for almost a year, though I'm not entirely sure why. Did she hope for a reconciliation? Or was she seeking a relationship with my children? It's possible, but I had given her clear warnings. She attempted to remain in Chicago, so I initiated surveillance on her. Whenever she applied for a job, I ensured that her complete work history followed her. As soon as she started dating, which seemed to happen quite promptly, I sent care packages to her potential partners, providing them with all the details about the woman they were inviting into their lives. I didn't particularly care whether they chose to keep her around after learning the truth, but I wanted to ensure she couldn't evade her past by ignoring it. I had to confront it every day, so it seemed only fair that she should as well. One of her prospective partners attempted to confront me for tormenting my ex-wife. He arrived at my doorstep fueled by liquid courage and physically pushed me as I opened the front door, causing me to stumble backward. It was a grave error on his part. As I've mentioned, I'm an ordinary person with no background in martial arts or special forces training. I've never been inclined toward violence, and I've never been in a physical altercation before. However, what I possessed at that moment was an overwhelming rage, an untamed reservoir of intense hatred for my wife and her lovers. Regrettably, he became the target of my outburst. I ended up with a noticeable black eye. He was fortunate to have survived. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and unlawful entry, receiving probation as a first-time offender. I believe the years of undergoing reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation left a lasting impact on him. Jennifer never attempted to reach out to me again. I ceased monitoring her activities after an additional year, during which she secured steady employment cleaning rooms at a highway hotel in a town approximately 700 miles away from me, deep in the backwoods of Virginia. The only other occasion I encountered her was 16 years later at my daughter's wedding. I'm aware that my children reconnected with Jennifer several years after graduating from college, and I made no effort to hinder their search for her. The passing years hadn't been kind to her. She had put on at least 20 pounds and displayed deep wrinkles around her lips and other noticeable signs of smoking, a recent development. All in all, she appeared aged and worn out. But beneath it all, I still recognized the woman to whom I had once given my heart. I felt nothing for her, but I recognized her. During the wedding ceremony, she sat alone in the bride's section of the church, positioned near the back. Her interaction with my daughter had been brief, polite, yet reserved. She made no effort to initiate a conversation with me. Throughout the night, we remained no closer than 30 feet from each other until the end of the evening. At that point, she was waiting for a cab outside. When I noticed the small gold band and tiny diamond on her left ring finger, a smile crossed my face for the first time in a while. Perhaps she had fared better than me, judging by the ring. I ambled in her direction, gazing at it for several moments. As I raised my gaze to meet her eyes, I detected a profound sadness in her expression. "Just so you know, you were the one who ruined my life first." I glanced at her left hand and then back into her eyes. "I'm genuinely glad you've found someone. I hope he brings you happiness." I briskly made my way to my car, where my driver had been waiting attentively. "Good evening, Mr. Smith. I trust you had a pleasant evening, sir. Shall we head to the club?" It went as well as I could have expected, Jonathan. "Let's go directly back to the house. I think I'd like to be alone tonight." "Certainly, sir." As we pulled away, I did my best not to look back, although I did catch her brief wave. "Farewell."